Hey folks, happy holidays and welcome back to our channel. So today is going to be kind of a blast from the past review where we're going to go back and take a look at revisit the Stark Arms, the G19 series. And why it's so important to revisit them is because now it's been about three years now. And I've used them considerably over the span of 3 years. And so now we can really see how they've held up after all this time, basically. So with that, let's go down through the list here and see how it goes. Not that I guess it really matters now because they don't really make these anymore. But I really want to give a shout out to these guns because they, up until this point, even with the new release of the the VFC ones and the upcoming Tokyo Marui G19, you heard me, the G19 by Tokyo Marui, it just still doesn't stack up to these old faithful ones right here in terms of how accurately they replicated the real steel. And just as a side note, in a few weeks I'll be getting my hands on the Tokyo Marui G19, and I will be doing a review, initial impressions and everything like that, so stay tuned for that soon. But anyway, back to these now. Both of these right here are your G19 made by VFC, or sorry, Stark Arms, maybe the same thing. But again, the trades have just never been, well, this one actually is a little bit different. This one has a plastic barrel on it, but let's go back to this one. This one has full trades, the full Glock 19, which is nothing really new anymore with the VFC one. Traditional Glock logo on the bottom. And then, of course, when you turn to the side, this is where it kind of shines a little bit better. Of course, your typical Glock logos in trade, Glock logos right here, and serial number. But also right here, made in Austria, Glock Inc., Smyrna, Georgia. Whereas the new ones, by Elite Force, they just say, official product of Glock, which is not really realistic. That's not what they have. I don't understand why they can't just stamp that on there, It's just to make it more realistic. They have everything else. They might as well just do that. And then, of course, at the bottom there, the official Glock patent and everything like that. So it says, U.S. patent number, and then a bunch of different numbers, which I don't know if they're real or not, but they're probably just copying off the real Glocks that you've seen. Either way, though, again, these are highly faithful replicas of the real thing. The color a little bit different. We've discussed it in a different video where the real steel one actually has a little bit grayish tone, and actually the WE's gotten it correct compared to this one. But other than that, really good. Same thing I want to mention too on the Dark Earth model. You got the same side. This one is the plastic barrel, because remember they come with two barrels, a metal one and a plastic one. The plastic one, unfortunately, does not have any logos on it, right, as you can see there. But for the most part, everything else is the same. The logos, the trades, the patent markings down here, everything is the same. They even have replicated parts that are supposed to be plastic on the real steel to be plastic in here. So, for example, the rear plate right here, I didn't know this, but it's actually plastic on the real steel as well as the guide rod, the spring guide rod in the front. The WE model has metal parts from the parts I just mentioned are metal. So I thought at first, wow, these are cheap, and then it turns out the real gun are plastic. So it's kind of cool to see that. Anyway, one more thing I forgot to mention. So the lower frame here for the Dark Earth one, the color is a little bit darker here than the WE model. This is a WEG17 right here. Now, WEG17 here is a little bit lighter. So anyway, as I was saying, camera cut out for a second there. The Dark Earth, the darker one by Stark Arms, look a lot more realistic to the real steel when you compare it at the gun store than the WE, the lighter version. It's a minor thing, but just something to point out in terms, again, back to that theme of how faithfully they replicated the real steel. Alright, so that's just the basic looks from it and everything like that. But let's go breaking down to how these guns hold up 3 years later after use. This is the first one I got when I only had a few gas blowbacks. This is actually my second gas blowback that I got. And I liked it so much I bought another one. And then they keep having sales and stuff like that, so I actually ended up buying 2 more here. These are actually unused right here, so these are the original box they came in. And just for you folks to see, this is what it looks like, because I've used this one quite a bit. This is a brand new one right here that I've never fired. and this is how they hold up. So obviously this one's a little bit dirtier. My hand, you know, dead skin all over and everything like that. Compare that to the brand new one right here. It's a lot cleaner. Not a lot of grease and everything listed on it. So that's how it looks like basically. But either way, they still both perform the same as a gas blowback. You know, there's no springs. It's not like an AEG in that sense. So you don't have to worry about that. Whether it's the first shot or the 5,000th shot. Well, not 5,000, but the 8,000th shot. It's gonna be the same FPS, really, for the most part. So obviously this one has a lot more wear and tear as I've used it. A little edging right there, paint scraping. I've never holstered these weapons into like those Black Hawk plastic holsters or anything like that, so they're probably going to see a little bit less wear and tear than if you were to use them. So they do look like they've held up pretty nicely with just typical use when I picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. But of course, I didn't use holsters, and I'm a little bit more careful of these, so that's probably why the paint looks still okay for the most part. Actually, it looks pretty nice, to be honest. This one's a little bit dinged up here and there, but that just comes with normal wear and tear. For the most part, still great though. The magazines, however, are a little bit different. They do see better days, so they do get worn out a little bit, as you can tell. This is actually a G17 magazine that I bought, and I kind of still use it in one of these guns sometimes. This is the original one that comes with it. This is the flushed magazine, so if you put that in here, it will stick flush. Now this one, of course, is a little bit. This one's a little bit unused, not too bad, but again, you'll get some wear and tear in the magazine. But they hold up pretty nicely, though, for the most part. Again, good job with the paint quality and everything. I like it. Now, as far as the parts goes, though, there are some parts that, for a gun to last 3 years, and I know 3 years doesn't mean anything, unless the question on everyone's mind is how many rounds, right? And it's harder to say, but I want to say this one, I've had it for longer, and I put more rounds through it because this was the only one I had along with the WE. Those were the only two gas blowbacks I owned at the time, so I used them a lot back then. So this one I would say is put it close to about, closer to 7, maybe 8,000 rounds, basically. But I stopped using it as much because I got newer guns, and I kind of just, cycle through the new ones too, and occasionally I get back to this one. But again, about 7,000 to 8,000 rounds, I think it would be an accurate estimate over the span of 3 years. This one here, probably a little bit less, because I got this one about a month later, and then I start, rotating between this one and this one, and so this one's maybe about like 5,000 rounds over the span of like over the span of 3 years. So, I think they've held up pretty well, and every time when a gas blowback, lasts you for 3 years and a couple thousand rounds like that, I think it's a pretty solid investment. So that's where I feel of these. Now, are there parts that break? Yes, there will be some. Mainly, the part that I can identify is going to be this barrel right here. So this is they always come with 2 extra barrels. This one happens to be the newer one. If you notice, there's a little piece right here, this little jagged edge right here. That part eventually gets clipped off when you rack the slide after about a couple hundred shots, really. That part just snaps off, so it just is missing. So it looks like that in both of these guns. Whether it's the plastic barrel or the metal one, they're going to have that problem. And it's not an issue, really, because for the most part, nothing really happens. I noticed that the slide just wobbles a little, or the barrel wobbles a little bit more, but not a big deal. Same thing, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's the metal one or the plastic one, it happens for both of them. Fortunately, not a whole lot happens when that does occur, though. But that is something I want to point out, because it has happened, and I would imagine it's going to happen to these newer ones that I've never used before if I were to use them. So that's something to consider. Let's see here. Next, I think I do want to mention a little bit about just how they perform. Oh, the other thing is the trigger. So, as we all know, let me demonstrate with this one. All Glocks have that trigger safety, right? Where you have to actually pull on the actual trigger, the whole trigger, put your finger on the whole trigger in order to to pull it, right? Otherwise, if you have it on the side like this, you're not going to depress that safety, trigger safety, and you're not going to be able to cycle it, or sorry, break the trigger. But on the Stark Arms Glock, the trigger here the spring gets worn out over time, and what happens is that it doesn't matter if you touch the safety or not. You can still pull the trigger, even if you're not touching the center one. It's supposed to look like that. See, it's supposed to have that little thing sticking out, but because it's all worn out, if I touch it in, it doesn't come back and it doesn't work. Because it works if it's like this, right? And it doesn't come back, but as you press it down a little bit, it's no longer there. Obviously, you don't rely on that as your safety. You know not to point at other folks, but just in terms of the quality, they could have done better there. The WE, the very first one I had it for about 6 years now, still works fine. I've pulled the trigger on that thing plenty of times. Same thing again. This one doesn't look as dramatic as before, but it still has the same issue. So you can still pull the trigger. If you pull it out a little bit further, then that's when it works. But again, similar problem. This one's just not as dramatic, but it still ultimately doesn't really work in terms of the trigger safety. So that's that. As far as the barrel though, a lot of folks complain that the WE model, for example, when you shoot it enough times, like after a couple thousand rounds, 1 or 2 actually, and I've had this experience before, the barrel snaps right off, right? So that was something I was very wary about, and when I bought these guns actually, I bought a couple of spare barrels because I was expecting that to happen. It never did, and actually, I can tell you, I deliberately ran this one with the metal one and this one with the plastic one to see if it mattered, whether one was more likely to break or not. My theory was the metal one was less flexible and was more likely to break, but it never did. And so both of these actually have held up pretty well, I would say. Again, I've shot more rounds through the plastic one than the metal one, but for the most part, I think it's not really an issue. It's not really a concern. I did have one part that did break on me on this one right here, and it was actually the it's hard to take this apart actually, but these are a little bit tougher to take apart, and I worry about breaking it sometimes. So there's basically, I don't want to do it on this one right now, but it's this part right here. It's the locker valve. So this part right here broke off in this gun for some weird reason. I don't know why. Fortunately though, I bought a garter one and it worked perfectly in there. So go figure. But other than that, those are the parts. Everything else is held up over time pretty well. So I think they've done a really good job of building a quality product that lasts. And then other than that, let me just show you folks the hammer spring is the other thing. So the hammer spring on this gun, basically after a while, obviously hammer springs wear out. This one hasn't worn out yet, and I've pulled the trigger plenty of times. So, it's really a solid job, and so I hope that these guns will continue to work. But if they don't, I got some backups right here, the old boxes right here, and I'm assuming these are going to be just as effective as these two models here. These are kind of the guinea pigs. Let's just do a quick video testing as to how they shoot again and see how they perform in terms of accuracy, and I think that's a wrap for this. Again, after having these for 3 years, I honestly don't think that there's another Glock that really tops these, just necessarily. The new VFC ones, I do admit that they shoot harder than these a little bit, and the recoil feels a lot more crisp. But in terms of the realism, I think these still take the top for the most part. And it's nice because remember, I forgot to mention, these are the only models that really come with a nice Easter egg that you can go on full auto if you choose. I never really do it. Again, right here is the switch over to towards me, and it becomes full auto. Switch it back to over there, and it becomes semi-auto again. And it's kind of cool because you have the option of firing full auto if you want to, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to. And it's done in a way that's kind of clever. It's not overbearing or unrealistic because, for example, they don't have like a little full auto switch right here like the G19 or the G18 models, because this is supposed to be a G19, right? So it wouldn't make sense to have that there, but you still have that feature if you wanted to. So it's really cool to see that. But overall, these guns have really stood up into the test of time, and I think they have done a really good job. It's a shame they don't really make them in the original form anymore. Again, I think there have been some improvements with the new VFC ones, but I guess my only quirk is that why don't they just get this part onto the new ones? Don't but other than that, this gun's been really good, and there have been some new improvements with the VFC ones, but otherwise, I think these are really good pieces in the past, and I can't wait to get the new Tokyo Marui one so I can compare it to these ones right here too. Yeah, let's just do some shooting tests real quick, and then take a look at how they perform. Alright folks, now we're going to test this and give more of a performance review. So first thing I have to do is I want to show this is the magazine. As with any gas blowback, they always have the leakage issues over time, but these ones can be easily fixed. So I've had my fair share of leakages with this one, but this one seems to be okay. So it's been a while since I've used this, so let's see if there's still gas in this or if it's retained it. I normally store them with a little bit of gas so that they don't, cause damage to the valves or the rubber seals. Let's see if that's the case. This is a test to see really if it's held up, which I don't think it's going to be a problem. But let's see here. So this is not for FPS. This is just to see if the gas is being retained. Oh yeah. So perfect lock back. The recoil is appropriate. So very good. So that's not what we were testing. We were only just testing for how well they retained the gas, which it did well. So let's do a quick FPS test. This is it's on a pretty cool day. It's actually cold outside, but it's about 75 inside the house right now. So let's try it with the G17 magazine. So it's not going to be flush, right? It's going to stick out a little bit. But again, this is the same manufacturer as Stark Arms, so it's going to be the same, really. Alright, so let's try it with this reading right here. Let's see what we catch it at. Okay, that's 301. Sorry, 293. 290. I don't know if you folks can actually read that. It's going to be a glaring. 288. So pretty good, right? Again, it's a gas blowback. It's not going to change dramatically from the first shot to whether it's the first shot or it's the 500 shot. Actually, I take that back. If you leave it dirty over time, there's a lot of gunk and grease in there. Sure, it could be kind of bad, but for the most part, if you keep it clean and you clean out that gunk and the grease, it should the cycling should be clean, but the FPS should be the same. All right, so let's do a couple rounds of full auto. Again, I never do full auto, but let's just show how it runs. Looks kind of cool, right? It looks like a Glock 18, but it's not. Yeah. So I have found that it's a little bit tougher if you fire in full auto continuous. It's not as gas efficient, so you kind of have to shoot in bursts like this. But other than that, if you shoot in bursts, it does wonders, really. So, and it still locks back if you were to maintain it. So kind of cool. So overall, very good guns. I wish they still made these. Because there are just certain things about these that are really done really well. I think if they took some of the improvements in the newer Elite Force and put it into this model right here, I think that would be the best overall option. But unfortunately, that's just not what they've done, and so these are just now really just one of a kind. So if you folks out there have one of these, it's hang on to them, because they're now an official collectible item. All right. Well, hope this has been informative, and it's kind of a cool review to see where it stands. It's kind of like a, you know, an unattainable piece now, but it's kind of cool to see. So hopefully this sets the stage for in a couple weeks when we get the Tokyo Marui G19, and we'll have a review on that. Alright, thanks a lot, folks. If you liked our channel, as always, please give us a subscription, subscribe to our channel, or give us a thumbs up, or give us some comments below on what you'd like to see about this gun, or any other suggestions we have for the upcoming videos. Thanks a lot, folks. Take care.